Hi, it's John, and welcome to the channel. Great to have you along today. It is 4:02 a.m., Thursday, November the 6th. I hope you're having a wonderful start to your Thursday morning. I tip my big blue mug of coffee to you. If you haven't subscribed to the channel at this point, what are you waiting for? Please just click on subscribe, and you'll help out the channel. Let's get to 40,000. So before I start today's video, I got a couple of big names coming up, interviews on this channel. Big names in the independence movement here, people that you know. I'm not going to say who they are yet, but I will give you a hint. Two of the people on the stage a couple of weeks ago at the Alberta legislature for the independence rally. I'm excited about it. I'm hoping to set one up tomorrow and maybe one later today, so watch for those in the upcoming week. So today I want to talk about the budget, but in a different way, from an Alberta perspective. Where does this leave Alberta after Mark Carney threw Danielle Smith a bone? There was not a lot of meat on the bone, but he threw her a bone the other day. And where does this leave Danielle Smith? We're going to get to that in just a moment. I was thinking about this morning. How can I describe the predicament that Danielle Smith, the Premier of Alberta, is in right now? Danielle Smith is between a rock and a hard place. The rock is the Alberta Prosperity Project, the independence movement. The hard place is the upcoming annual general meeting of the UCP, which is at the end of this month. More on that in just a moment. So where do we stand here in Alberta when it comes to our oil and gas industry? Well, here are the 9 bad laws. Remember, Danielle Smith made a whole video on this, and she said the next government prior to the election on April 28th must get rid of these 9 bad laws. And she gave them 6 months. 6 months have passed. She's now giving Carney up until the Grey Cup, which I think is in the middle of November. So here are the 9 bad laws. You know them very well. Repeal Bill C-69. Lift the oil tanker ban, scrap the clean energy regulations, and the prohibition on single-use plastics. Now, I've checked off abandoning the net zero car mandate, but the actual review on this ended on the day of the budget. So we're going to find out whether this comes back or not. I think it's coming back. I think they're just going to push it a little further down the road. Returning oversight of industrial carbon pricing to the provinces, halting federal censorship of energy companies. Well, that was part of the bone that Carney gave Danielle Smith the other day. I think of all these laws, that's probably the one at the bottom. Still a bad one, but one right at the bottom. Ensuring Alberta's oil and gas corridors have access to the northeast and west coast. That didn't happen. Eliminate the emissions cap. And this is the one everybody's talking about. If we go over to this article from the National Post, federal budget sends mixed signals to Alberta's energy sector. Leaders in Alberta's energy sector saw some things to like in Tuesday's federal budget. Mark Carney's first as Prime Minister are partial climb downs on the oil and gas emissions cap and federal provisions against greenwashing, 2 of the 9 bad laws critics say are throttling Alberta's oil and gas sector. The 2 leaders have signaled that they'd like to strike a deal on resource development by mid-November. Smith said in a statement that she was withholding comment on the budget. I haven't heard anything really from her amidst the sensitive negotiations with the federal government. I think there's a little bit more down here we can read. Yes, Alberta Environment Minister Rebecca Schultz said she was disappointed that Carney didn't use the occasion to kill the electric vehicle mandate, with the end of the Prime Minister's 60-day review of the suspended policy serendipitously falling on budget day. I absolutely think this is a missed opportunity for the federal government. Now, where do we stand? Where are we actually when it comes to moving forward with the oil and gas industry here in Alberta? Well, Dan McTeague's very well known. Dan is with Canadians for Affordable Energy. I used to interview Dan many years ago when he was with GasBuddy.com. He's a former Liberal, and this is what he had to say about the budget the other day, particularly when it comes to oil and gas.
And while there are no cuts in programs, where there ought to have been some that should have been considered, and there's a variety of them where the government could have gone, it feels that it did the right thing by getting rid of the carbon tax just before the federal election, but it's going to max out. It's going to supercharge an industrial carbon tax. That means every business is now a target in this country. Yeah, you might not see it directly on the invoice and the slip that you receive when you go and purchase whatever goods you have, but it will be there for businesses that elect to stay in Canada. This is going to be a real drag on small, medium, and even large businesses who are already under significant pressure, not just because of tariffs, but because this is a country that decided to put a lot of regulations on every aspect of production, manufacturing, resource extraction, resource refining, and it really made life more difficult for business. And as a result, many of those costs, where they could, were passed on to consumers. They will continue to be so.
By the way, a link in the description to the full video from Dan McTeague from Canadians for Affordable Energy. Go over and subscribe to their channel. And what's really interesting about this, as I said, Dan is a former Liberal MP. This is what they used to be like. Reasonable. They're not like that anymore. Dan wouldn't be welcome in the Liberal Party anymore. Over to this article here from the National Post. Jesse Klein, Carney trolls Canada with claim buyers want low carbon oil. Budget 2025, another Liberal exercise in central planning. And down here, it's interesting. I like the couple of paragraphs down here. Again, link in the description. You can read this whole thing. Even the industrial carbon tax, which increases the cost of domestic manufacturing, making us less competitive internationally, is framed as a pro-business strategy. Quote, an effective industrial carbon pricing system, the budget claims, is essential to providing certainty to businesses looking to invest and compete internationally. Industrial carbon pricing drives investment to reduce emissions and build the competitiveness of Canadian business. It is expected to deliver more emission reductions than any other policy, with negligible impacts on affordability for Canadians, unquote. And if you believe that, I've got some meme coins to sell you. Dan McTeague on this as well.
The fact the Liberals cannot get rid of the carbon tax and they want an industrial carbon tax, or that they won't get rid of emission caps unless there are a number of conditions that are met, much of which requires massive amounts of investment in carbon sequestration, what they call the carbon capture and underground storage, a very dangerous process, by the way. And although it's been done in Saskatchewan and has promised of doing it, the idea was that somehow these things would give a bit of a sop to those out there who believe that people will be lined up to make investments once again in Canada. No issue as to government investing in infrastructure dealing with pipelines. No infrastructure is for natural gas or oil or LNG. All these things remain way up in the air, and without any real takers, it's unlikely we're going to see much activity.
In other words, putting a carbon tax on industry is not good for business. It's not good for investment. And Carney still hasn't given in on all those other 9 bad laws that Danielle Smith demanded, 8 months ago. Now, Smith is coming up, as I mentioned earlier in this video, between a rock and a hard place. There's going to be some real movement by the end of this month. And I've got a call to action for you in just a moment if you want Alberta independence. Here's Cory Morgan talking about this on his show yesterday. Link in the description. Go subscribe to the Western Standard, to Cory's channel as well on YouTube, and subscribe to the Western Standard as well. Give them some of your love because they're a good conservative news outlet.
Scheduling a referendum would serve the UCP government well, too. The deadline's fast approaching for the demands Premier Smith made of the Carney government, and so far he's completely ignored them. There's few indications he's going to make any significant policy changes before her deadline in the Grey Cup. He said he'd kill the emissions cap, but then he added a bunch of caveats to the policy. If Smith lets Carney laugh in her face after these demands, her government's going to be rendered impotent when it comes to federal incursions and the blockage of Alberta's industries. If she scheduled an independence referendum the day after Grey Cup, though, I think people across the country would sit up and take notice. Support for independence in Alberta might not have hit majority level yet across the province, but the independence faction within the UCP is significant. Those independence advocates are getting impatient, and they're going to turn their guns towards the UCP if they don't see some action when it comes to dealing with a federation that treats Alberta poorly. The UCP AGM is approaching in just a few more weeks. And there are movements afoot to try and turn the UCP in an overtly sovereigntist party. This would be disastrous for the UCP. The best way Smith can take the pressure off from within her own party is to set an independence referendum date for mid-2026. Independence advocates can then turn their focus and energy into campaigning for the referendum, and the Premier can just say she's letting democracy run its course, which it would be.
Cory's right. Premier Smith, call for an independence referendum now and do it for next year, because the shit is going to hit the fan real soon if you don't do that. Because, as Cory said, the United Conservative Party annual general meeting is coming up, and it's on the way from the 28th to 30th. And it's time, and sorry for the defecation imagery here, folks. Premier Smith should or get off the pot. Because there's a reckoning coming, and the gloves are off. In fact, at least one of the guests I mentioned at the beginning of this video that I'm going to be interviewing here is going to talk about this. They got a plan at this meeting that's coming up. Now, I'm thinking seriously about signing up as a member of the UCP. You might want to do that as well, because then you'll be able to vote for their board of directors and who's up for re-election at the end of the month. Well, let's find out who it is. There's a number of people, but the number one thing is the president. We've got the VP of the communications, secretary, VP fundraising. We can vote for all of the people that want to see Alberta independence. And then Danielle Smith is going to be, like I said at the beginning of this, really between a rock and a hard place. She's going to have to make a decision on this. And who knows, if we can change the United Conservative Party enough at the annual general meeting, we might get a good Christmas present, a vote on a referendum. Now, I'm going to leave you with a video from Dan McTeague, just kind of summing up what the future holds when it comes to this ridiculous budget from the Liberals the other day. I appreciate you being here. Thank you so much. I do appreciate it. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications. I will see you in the next one. Dan McTeague, take it away.
The fact that they want to keep carbon taxes, the fact that they do not want to back away from net zero suggests to me that they're just Trudeau light. And what they're going to do is continue down this road of spending more money than we're taking in, driving out investments, and driving the next generation that wants to take over this country and prosper as we did. They're going to drive that generation right into the ground.